Hey everyone. So I spend a lot of time thinking about competing. I think I'm still, even though I inherited high rise from base camp a couple years ago, I'm still very much in this situation where there's a lot of people I have to compete with. High rise was built in 2007 when there wasn't a lot of competition for a web-based CRM tool, but today the environment is littered with competitors. So what do we do? How do we compete? We're still trying to vie for new business. What do we do? I'll get to that. I had a funny run-in with a celebrity pretty recently. A couple years ago, my daughter was born, Addison, and we had a follow-up visit with my wife's doctor. And so we're getting out of this doctor's office, and we're in this elevator bank. And out of the corner of my eye, I think I see Michael Cera, who you know from movies like Juno and Arrested Development. He's in a bunch of stuff, and he looked like the guy. But I didn't want to stare at him. I didn't want to make like a big overt gesture to look at him. And so I made my eyes. The elevators were shiny. I started looking. I tried to go see him in the reflection of the elevators, and he was already staring at me. I don't know why. Maybe he just kind of knew I was going to pull this maneuver off and wanted to kind of freak me out a little bit. And it was Michael Cera. And so the elevators opened, and it was packed with people. So my wife, Michael, and I, we like get on the elevator, and we're just jammed together like shoulder to shoulder. And what was funny though, I mean, I tell people this weird, funny run-in about Michael Cera, but something I remember about it, which was kind of funny, was he pulled out a phone, but it wasn't a smartphone, it was a flip phone. And I think maybe a lot of people knowing kind of what Michael Cera does and who he is, his personality maybe that comes across on TV and in movies, that's something you might expect. But I think it's actually an interesting reminder of how to compete. And I'll get to that in just a minute. But first, I want to talk about Robert Cialdini. I'm probably butchering this guy's name, but this is the guy. He wrote a book called Influence. He's a professor of psychology and marketing at Arizona State University. I think my sister, taking a psychology course, actually had his book. That's where I first bumped into this guy. Brilliant guy. He's been writing about kind of persuasion and influence for years. And so one of the premises in the book is social proof, right? That crowds have an impact on us. If you see an advertisement for a product, you're probably going to see testimonials from people because that stuff works. That's not what probably surprises you. What surprises you is another thing that Robert Cialdini bumped into, which is we have a very bad ability to determine when the crowd is impacting on us. So for example, he was doing this study with an experiment with a group for television, and he set up this experiment. So there were two groups. One group was a street musician who was just trying to get donations from a crowd. The next group was a street musician trying to get donations from a crowd, but inside the crowd were friends. They call them Confederates. So people kind of in on the gag, paid to kind of participate in this thing, and the Confederates were going to give donations, but they're fake donations. They're, told by the musician, hey, when I start playing, you come up and you give me $1. So you probably aren't surprised. The group with the Confederates did like 8 times more donations, like a ton more donations than the group without the Confederates. But here's what might surprise you. When this group with the Confederates was asked, hey, why did you give the donations? Not a single person who gave a donation mentioned anything about seeing someone else give a donation. They never said anything about, hey, everyone else was doing it, so I did it. Instead, they said things like, oh, I thought he was a good musician, or I felt sorry for the guy. Now, that's really interesting. That's really weird that even though clearly there's a difference in groups, when the crowd is kind of doing something first and getting other people to do it, no one realizes it. So that's kind of striking. It's striking that we are already persuaded by a group, but we're very bad at determining when that's happening. And I think that leads to kind of problems with how we do product development, how we run companies. There's a guy, when John F. Kennedy died, there was a guy named Jimmy Breslin who wrote one of the most famous articles about John F. Kennedy and the funeral. But what was so interesting to me is he wasn't even at the funeral. He was at the grave site with this grave digger, a guy by the name of, I keep forgetting this guy's name, Clifton Pollard. I think that's Clifton Pollard. So Clifton Pollard was the grave digger that was digging the gravesite. There were no interviewers interviewing this guy. There was like 1 million people at the funeral, lining the funeral procession from where the casket was to Arlington Cemetery. So everybody wanted to be at the funeral. Like thousands of reporters were at the funeral. But this guy, Jimmy Breslin, skipped the funeral altogether and hung out with the gravedigger. And the gravedigger, it became one of the best stories about JFK. And it was just shocking to me that this guy, Jimmy Breslin, had the wherewithal, and he ends up, he's a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist, and it's because of this attitude he has, and he had it in a lot of the writing he did. He skips interviewing celebrities. He skips meeting, going to these big events, and he focuses on finding things that people are ignoring, and that's really important to me in how I do things. So this week we've been just awash with news about how bad iPhone has been doing. Apple fell, I think 8 days in a row, their stock price fell, which hasn't happened since like the 90s, 1998 maybe. But in the middle of of iPhone sales, and the news of iPhone sales falling, there's an article in the Wall Street Journal about the flip phone business, that 1 in 7 people in the United States are still buying flip phones. And that this year they sold, the flip phone industry sold 10% more flip phones than they did the year before. That's just kind of shocking, right? The iPhone sales are falling, the flip phone business is booming. And I think that's really interesting. One of the flip phone companies in this Wall Street Journal article is a company called Spare One. This flip phone does almost nothing. It's not a smartphone at all. You can store 9 people in the address book because there's just like speed dial. It's an emergency phone. It runs on AA batteries. The thing is meant to last forever. Put in in a car or stroller, something where you might need an emergency phone. And they're doing well. And all these other flip phones are doing well because they're focusing on stuff that the crowd has just not focused on. They're all focused on the next camera, the next new, app platform, the next high-resolution monitor screen in a small case. And these flip phones are just ignoring all of it. And they're doing really well by ignoring all of it. And it's that ability to ignore things has been a big reason I feel like I've been successful. With Draft, when Draft came out, everybody, it's writing software. Writing software, everybody's been obsessed with real-time collaboration, formatting. How can I, mimic the formatting of Word online? How can I do fancy charts and graphs and pictures and bold and, embed, interesting videos and things in the stuff I'm writing? And I realized everybody's doing this. The thing I need to work on was going to be the thing that had to be the opposite of this. And if I couldn't find something that was like the opposite of this, it wasn't worth my time. So I went completely opposite direction. There was going to be no real-time editing. It was going to be turn-based, nothing fancy. There are no fancy, formatting. You can add some markup to get some formatting out of it, but while you're writing, there's nothing. And it was totally against what advice were giving me. Everybody was like, oh, this has got to be real time. Oh, you got to use this new technology that was just released in your thing that everybody else is using right now. And I just said, no, I don't want to. Instead, I'm going to use the time to do some stuff that, again, nobody else is doing. The time I save, I'll start looking at, teaching people. I'll start using the time to focus on getting, pro editors helping people edit their documents. And Draft took off like crazy. And so now I'm trying to do the same thing at Highrise. We just did bulk email at Highrise, a feature called Broadcast. And again, I look at what the competition is doing with bulk email, and everybody's so focused on high-fidelity bulk email, drag-and-drop editors, templates, these beautiful designs, like so many features around bulk email and making it pretty and analytics. And I said, okay, we just have to do the opposite of this. I'm going to focus on people who just want to get a quick message out, so there's barely any formatting. We basically encourage you to send a plain text email and make it look like a plain text email, because a lot of people still want to do that. And it's been taking off like crazy. It's still very early in the stuff that we're trying to do at Highrise, but Broadcast is like, we're sending the peak email, bulk email rate we were sending at a couple weeks ago is now like our daily average. So we just keep doing more and more of these bulk emails. And I think a big focus is just because we're doing just the opposite of what everyone else is doing. So it's been a key ingredient to the success I've had. So one last story. I think it was like 2010, there was a flight, QF-23, I believe it is. Maybe it's 32. 32, QF-32, Qantas Airlines. They were taking off from Singapore, and minutes after they were taking off, an engine just exploded. And the shrapnel from this engine just tore through like so many other systems on the plane. Basically, the plane was like running on like one major system left. I don't know, there's like 22 major systems running an airplane. 21 of them were damaged and offline. So this is the worst shape an airplane could be in. They've run this airplane through simulators with other pilots. No one can land this plane. But this plane did land. The guy, his name is, it's got a really neat name, De Crespigny. Again, I'm going to butcher this guy's name. But anyway, he was the head pilot, and they landed this plane. And there's a really neat book. There's a neat book out right now called Smarter, Faster, Better by Charles Duhigg. I highly recommend getting this book. And they highlight this flight, and Charles does some interviews with the head pilot. And there was just a really funny thing. So as the head pilot was going to Singapore, before they boarded this crazy plane that they saved everybody on and went through this crazy ordeal, he turns to his co-pilot in the car on the way to the airport. They were going through some exercises, kind of visualize what might happen in an accident, and you know, if something bad happened. And he turns to his co-pilot and he says to him, "Mark, if you see everyone looking down, I want you to look up. If we're all looking up, you look down." I think that's a really good thing to remember. And thanks for watching, and I will see you again soon. Bye.